Our intent with hosting this community forum is to create a shared space in which we all can share information, thoughts, and ideas about how we can do better to serve the needs of older community members. So before we hear from our speakers, we would like to share a short video clip from the PBS Searching for Justice series, which speaks directly to some of the challenges older citizens face after release from incarceration. And I think it will give us a really good starter for the conversation.
Well, every year, about 600,000 people are released from state and federal prisons. In a moment, we'll hear from experts about policies that could help those people better reintegrate into society. But first, as part of the PBS NewsHour's Searching for Justice series, here now is a reprise of conversations I had with some formerly incarcerated people about the difficulties older men and women face after decades behind bars.
Hi, how you doing? How are you doing, Doctor? I'm good. How's it going?
At the Transitions Clinic Network in San Francisco, Dr. Shira Shavid's first patient of the day is Melvin Malcolm.
So how's the fatigue been? Are you still feeling pretty tired? Yeah, still am.
Malcolm is 74 years old. He suffers from degenerative rheumatoid arthritis and prostate cancer.
Just gonna take a quick listen to your heart.
Diseases he developed while serving 38 years in prison for murder and robbery. He was released just 3 months ago, and so far, life on the outside hasn't been easy. What are some of the challenges that you're facing day to day?
Handling things on your own. Generally, incarcerated, everything is handled for you. Your medication is brought to you. You're told when to eat, you're told when to sleep. Things are more or less programmed for you. Once you come out, you have to do things on your own. And it's pretty hard to get used to doing that.
Will you relax your arm for me, please?
He says the health care he's getting now is much better than what he got in prison, but nearly 4 decades behind bars has taken a toll.
I have degenerative rheumatoid arthritis, as you can see by my hands. And I'm gonna have to have, I think, knee surgery. You know, and my feet are really bad.
Did anything else come up in your visits with them today?
Dr. Shavid says Malcolm is a typical patient here at Transitions, a national network of nearly 50 nonprofit health clinics that serve people post-incarceration.
Our practice here, 66% of people have done 30 or more years in the state prison system. And what we know is that people age more quickly when they're incarcerated. And so when we think of older adults, we actually think of people who are 55 and older who have been in the system.
The team here at Transitions tries to step in and meet the most pressing needs, not just medical.
But that's why you have a little phone icon.
There's technology training,
Help
getting IDs and documentation,
They didn't put my middle name on the ID card.
and access to food.
You also got some chicken too. Yeah, chicken do a great job.
A key part of this team, people who know what re-entry after prison is like. People like 58-year-old Ron Sanders. He battled addiction and was in and out of prison during his 20s on drug charges.
So imagine somebody's been locked up for 20, 30, 40 years. It's good to have somebody to help you, guide you along. Your first time going to Walgreens to get medication? No, this is not my first time, but it's the first time I'm going to get a refill.
He's been working at Transitions for 15 years as a community health worker and spends a lot of time building connections and trust with patients often skeptical of the system. Why do you think they trust you?
Because, you know, they know I came from the same place they came from. You know, I've been in those shoes before, you know, and I know how scary it is just getting out. And especially you get out and you don't have any like family support or anything, it's really tough.
But for older adults exiting prison, this level of support is rare. Few clinics like this exist across the country, and the ones that do are often located in urban areas. For people who need longer-term medical care, the options are even more limited.
Being away for a while, I was really scared.
Letitia is a 67-year-old woman who suffers from mental health disorders and lymphedema, which causes swelling of the arms and legs. She served 17 years in prison for murder. She asked us not to use her last name.
I have PTSD, and I had deep depression, and I was very, very disturbed.
In 2019, she was released from prison and discharged to 60 West,
a privately owned nursing home in Rocky Hill, Connecticut with 95 beds. Opened in 2013, 60 West is funded mainly by the state of Connecticut and its Medicaid system. Many residents here are formerly incarcerated.
Being able to look anyone up and find out what their history is very easy now in our social world.
Administrator Jessica Deering says nursing homes are often reluctant to accept residents who've committed serious crimes.
Now, certainly the person could be the picture of nursing home appropriate. However, traditional nursing homes weren't giving them a chance to be a part of their community. So that's why 60 West was created, so that we could provide an environment of stigma-free living.
If this place wasn't here, where would you have gone? What were your options?
I don't know. Probably a shelter.
Jessica Deering says because the cost of care inside prisons is so high, this is a more cost-effective approach for the state of Connecticut.
Having us open actually saves the taxpayers of Connecticut annually because we focus on care. So we can do it in a much more efficient manner, and ultimately it costs less money.
Yeah, that video was just a little snapshot of some of the things that we're going to discuss in today's conversation. Definitely a lot of things to discuss. Before I introduce our speakers, I would just like to remind everyone that we're going to hold questions until after presentations, but feel free to drop questions into the chat as they come to you. We'll be monitoring the chat and definitely try to address as many questions as we can during the Q&A. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our speakers. We have a very powerful lineup, very experienced individuals out there advocating for the community. And I would like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Joseph Strickland. Joseph Strickland is the Senior Research Specialist at the Jane Addams Center for Social Policy and Research. He is also Adjunct Professor of Social Work at the University of Illinois, Chicago, Jane Addams College of Social Work, the Managing Editor of the Journal of Offender Rehabilitation, and the co-founder of Acclivus Incorporated, an organization that works to provide support services for formerly incarcerated people returning to the workforce and individuals at risk of perpetrating or being harmed by violence. He has over 25 years of experience in community-based advocacy, reentry programs, criminal justice reform, and public safety. Dr. Strickland has extensive experience in building social networks that provide justice-involved individuals with social capital to achieve reentry success. Following, we'll hear from Kevin Blumenberg. Kevin was born and raised on Chicago's South and East Side. Unfortunately, at the young age of 16, he was incarcerated as a juvenile and quickly learned how to survive in an unfamiliar, callous environment. For more than 29 years, Kevin survived the daily life of incarceration, during which time he studied and received certificates in anger management, effective decision-making, conflict resolution, and 28 others. He earned his high school diploma, became a peer educator, and became certified by the Illinois Department of Public Health to provide peer education on sexually transmitted infections. Upon his release from prison, Kevin began working as a canvasser for the People's Lobby and helped to get the Pretrial Fairness Act passed in the state of Illinois. Kevin has also worked as a community navigator for Acclivus Incorporated and as a lead organizer with Parole Illinois. He is also a University of Illinois, Chicago Jane Addams College of Social Work Urban Scholar Fellow. We are very proud to have Kevin with us this morning. Kevin believes strongly that education is essential to helping yourself and others in society. And finally, Celia Colón is a progressive national social justice expert. She is an Emmy Award nominee, author, educator, and inspirational speaker. Celia is the CEO and founder of Giving Others Dreams, a nonprofit organization that provides direct reentry services and holistic support for justice-impacted women. She has served on Chicago Beyond's Advisory Council on Justice Initiatives. She is also a University of Illinois, Chicago Jane Addams College of Social Work Urban Scholar Fellow. We're proud to have her with us. A community task force member for the City of Chicago, Chicago Police Department Use of Force Working Group, and serves on State Attorney Kim Foxx's Returning Citizen Advisory Board. Celia uses her unique life experiences to advocate and support legislative policies that advance smart criminal justice reform. As a passionate community leader, mentor, mother, grandmother, and organizer, she is reimagining what reentry with support looks like for women. So without further ado, let's begin with Dr. Strickland.
Good morning. And I also want to extend a welcome to you for joining us for this very important forum. Before I begin my presentation on, what we've done at the Policy Center and why we've taken up this issue, I just want to say a couple of things. So first and foremost, I want to give a shout out to Dr. Glenn Gervais, who was responsible for me having a PhD. I had met her at my field placement when I was attending University of Chicago, obtaining my master's degree. And somehow she convinced me that applying for the doctoral program was a good thing. At the time, I had no idea or no aspirations to obtain a PhD, and thought, thought after going through 2 years of a master's program, obtaining a PhD was well beyond my grasp. But fortunately, she saw what I didn't see. So I thank you for being here, and I thank you again for contributing to me and my family. The other thing I want to say is, this issue is important to me, not just because, the dean, who was my mentor, boss, and research partner, asked me to take on this issue. This is important because I come from a community which is just south of the red line, where the red line ends or begins, depending on your perspective, where people go to jail and prison every week or come home from jail and prison every week. And, my intentions when I began pursuing my PhD was to focus on unintentional injury to minority children. But the peer pressure from the members of my community forced me to deal with this issue because it was real to them. So now it's real to me. So I thank you again for helping us help each other. So let's go to the slides, please. So the Policy Center, under the direction of the Dean of the College of Social Work, Dr. Creasie Finney Hairston, who's also the director of the Policy Center, was asked to take on this issue of adults returning home from prison. One thing I did not mention is that as the Hair Club president used to say, I'm not only the president, I'm also a member. So I'm a returning prisoner. I returned when I was 40. So at the time when the dean said this was an issue that we wanted to take on, I was like, yeah, I guess that's an important issue. I really didn't see myself as an older adult, but now I've been faced to deal with reality. And I see peers that have come home, have to deal with these issues. And there are still men and women who, from my childhood, are still incarcerated. So really in this presentation, I'm going to talk about the work that we've done. We did several forums on older adult prisoners. Those forums were attended by not only scholars from Jane Addams and other institutions, but practitioners who work in the field, former prisoners, and family members of incarcerated individuals. And these forums were done in partnership with the Illinois Department of Corrections. Next slide, please. So what are the causes of an increase in older prison population? So the reasons can be attributed to factors such as tougher sentencing practices, which are mandatory minimums, 3 strikes, truth in sentencing laws, as well as increased use of life sentences. But also correctional facilities, even though they may want to release older prisoners because of the cost of care, they don't have the legal authority to say, we're going to send this person home, we want to send this person home, even though that might be the moral and ethical thing to do. That has to come from the court system or from the governor's office. Next slide, please. So why should we consider reducing the older prisoner population? Obviously, older prisoners have different needs than younger prisoners, especially in the area of healthcare. Older prisoners are twice as expensive to incarcerate as the average prisoner, so reducing the older prisoner populations just makes sense just because of the cost savings. And also, people move away from crime the older they get. So crime rates decline substantially as people age. So the risk of older prisoners to public safety is minimum, much more minimum than younger offenders. Next slide. Healthcare is a major issue for aging prisoners. Prisons are not nursing homes or hospitals, yet people in prison, especially older prisoners, have nursing home and hospital needs as they age in prison. Again, healthcare is expensive, especially for complicated diagnoses like dementia, cancer, or renal failure. But also transportation to obtain healthcare is expensive for prisoners who need treatment like dialysis and chemotherapy. Next slide, please. Prisons are designed to accommodate younger and healthier populations. Younger prisoners have a different mindset than older prisoners. Older prisoners are more accepting of their fate, while younger prisoners treat prison time as a phase. If you, as a parent and grandparent, and some of you can relate to this, you might have teens running around the house and bouncing around the house, but there's escapes for someone who's free. You can go out the house, you can ask them to send them off to an event, but imagine having to be in a cell or in a space in a day room with a lot of young people bouncing around and you're in your 50s, 60s, or 70s. But also in prison, older prisoners may not be looked upon as we do on the outside as mentors or sources of wisdom. Older prisoners can be disrespected and abused by younger prisoners. Next slide, please. So post-prison issues that face older prisoners. When you release, you have to find your own health coverage. Although in some cases, pre-release programs prepare prisoners for reentry, the information and resources can easily become outdated. Take, for example, the issue of COVID. Who would know where to send folks to deal with that issue on the outside? It just hit us. So it's hard to deal with an issue like that in real time when it was unexpected. Upon returning to the community, many older prisoners do not have access to housing and/or money to acquire a place to stay. And also, there are many facilities that frown upon older prisoners with criminal records coming there. Older prisoners face impediments that make securing gainful employment difficult, such as having a criminal background. The age or overall state of health may prove to be too much of an injury risk for employers. Next slide. So what are some of the best practices from other states? So we saw this program in San Francisco that focuses on the aging population. It provides transitional housing, case management, pre and post-release counseling, transitional support programs, health and mental health services, access to certified addiction specialists, and useful provisions such as clothing and hygiene products. And then in Ohio, there's a program that's a pre-release program with age-appropriate informational housing, employment training, job searching skills, self-care, available benefits, and educational opportunities. And these programs and services allow older populations proper supports and resources to do successful integration. Next slide. And as you can see from the video in Puerto Rico, and 14 other states. The Transitional Clinic Network is a network of medical homes for individuals with chronic health conditions who have recently been released from incarceration. Next slide. So Illinois has a compassionate release program. As of January 1st, 2022, our own state began providing compassionate release to eligible incarcerated individuals under the newly enacted medical release law. Compassionate release was previously only available through executive clemency. However, only individuals diagnosed with terminal illnesses or certain medical conditions are eligible for consideration. Older individuals are not automatically eligible for consideration, regardless of how advanced in age they may be. And obviously, we have some of the Illinois Department of Correction folks in this forum now, and we also have folks from Illinois, from the Lieutenant Governor's office that focus on reentry, so they can give us updates on some of the other things that are going on currently in Illinois. But we have with us, as she mentioned, we have two individuals that work with current prisoners and released prisoners who can give us real-time info on facing this helping to support this population. So I'm going to turn it on over to Kevin Blumenberg.
All right, thank you, Joe. And I want to say thank you to everybody who showed up. I believe that communication can enhance our level of understanding, but we have to be willing to come together, have open, honest conversations with each other, regardless if it may hurt our feelings. That's how we grow. That's how we expand. So my name's Kevin Blumenberg. I'm a returning citizen. I've been home now for like 2 years, and I think the 28th of this month would be 2 years, 2 months. I've witnessed firsthand what it means to witness or understand ageism. And I also understand what it means to say that oftentimes we perish because of lack of knowledge. People suffer because they don't know. And it's unfortunate that we're living in a time where we are presumed to be like progressive thinkers, much more wiser than generations before us. But it's sad when you look at a generation of people in our society, which are elderly people, who are now being walked into a caste system. It's unfortunate that you have to go through these things. I mean, just getting older, having to battle and deal with health issues, and not being in a position to do things for yourself, and have to learn how to start relying on other people to help you get through things. But to go through that in prison and then make a transition out here into society and find out that this new way of thinking is not welcoming to elderly people, it's kind of sad. But that's why it's important that we have these type of conversations so that we could begin to educate each other about what is actually needed. I did about approximately like almost 30 years in prison. I spent 12 years in time supermax. And two things I learned from being there is that I knew that I had to be mindful about my health, because I was seeing older men that I was incarcerated with. I started seeing their health decline. I started seeing they didn't have adequate access to meaningful health care. And as a result of that, although they were strong in spirit and mentally, their body started to decline, maybe because of bad eating habits that they had, or they didn't work out as much when they were younger. But nevertheless, I've also witnessed a lot of these men being returned back out into society. And when they got here, society was not welcoming to them. Because I was able to see all this stuff at a very young age, I started to make decisions to try to see if I can minimize it. I changed the way that I ate. I worked out every day, all in the effort to try to maintain my health. So when I did return back out into society, that I could try to use this energy and this health that I got to go out here and really like labor in order to put myself in a better position so that it doesn't have to happen to me or anybody else. I want for myself what I want for my people. And if I want better health for myself, then that means that I have to make sure that I'm taking care of myself, and I have to also make sure that I'm having conversations with people to say, hey, look, we have to be more welcoming and inviting to our elderly. In some societies, uh, the society is measured off of how you take care of your elderly people. It's a sad day when we have people or we say we embrace the ideas of Article 1, Section 11 of the Illinois State Constitution, that the objective is to restore people to useful citizenship. And then if we give them the opportunity to come back home, they get walked into a failed system that puts them in the caste system and says that we're not going to be very welcoming to you because you are older. You're not as stronger. You're not as faster. You're not as quicker. And some of the damage is being done is that you may feel healthy spiritually, mentally, as a elder person coming home, but then you get walked into a society after spending almost like 30 years in prison, and it's like you get hit with the reality that you kind of feel inadequate because you don't know how to deal with technology, with computers. The telephone is nothing but a computer. I know after doing all the time I did, I thought I had prepared myself for everything. But what happened was that when I got home, I realized that I didn't prepare myself, number one, for the impact that my absence had on my family. Being able to come home and see my mother after almost 30 years in prison and hadn't seen her probably 10 years prior to that, and realizing that she had aged, that she had got older, and that I was not really in a position at that time when I was incarcerated to really help her. So this made me start thinking about educating myself. I got locked up at 16. I got kicked out of school, and I started realizing that if I wanted to be able to help not only myself but to help others, that I needed education in order to do that. I'm gonna say it again. I'm gonna continue to repeat it. Oftentimes, our people perish because of lack of knowledge. We suffer because people are not understanding about our elderly, and they're not really understanding about what it means to educate our people in a way where if they apply what is they learn, it's possible for us to build a better future for them. Education is the bedrock to a better future. And it's not just for the youth. Education is also the bedrock to a better future for the elderly, how we treat them. We have to get it out of our minds that because someone we believe is older, is not as vibrant, as strong as we think that they were when they were younger, they're useless, that they should be castaways, that they should be treated unfairly. Wisdom dictates that if you've been doing something for 100 years and it's not working, wisdom dictates that you try something different. And oftentimes trying something different means expanding ourselves in ways that we haven't thought about it. It costs more money, twice as much money, to take care of an elderly person in prison than it does a younger individuals. As Mr. Strickland said earlier, they have different needs, they have different concerns. You may come into the prison system young, full of energy and strength, and rebellious towards a lot of things that's going on. But as you get older, even if you're still caught up in the culture of criminal thinking, as you get older, that starts to fade out. And so if we're setting up mechanisms and processes that allow people the opportunities to be rehabilitated, and we're able to monitor and see that they've respected the process and they've aged out of crime, then in accordance with Article 1, Section 11, we should be making sure that we are creating an atmosphere that is welcoming for them when they're coming back out into society. Otherwise, they're going to be castaways. We're going to probably end up getting taxed, and it's going to be a burden on everybody. Then you have some elder people that come home and they feel like, man, don't nobody care about me no more. I ain't strong. I ain't sharp as I used to be. I don't know how to work the phone. And imagine how that can make you feel as an individual who fought 30 years to survive a callous environment, to come home and then find out that a 6-year-old can work a phone better than you. That can do something to you psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. You can be defeated by that. especially if you're being walked into an environment that is not welcoming towards elderly people. So I'm hoping that we can put our minds together and start making like a real conscious and righteous effort to change the way that we look at the elderly, whether they're in prison or they're out here in society with us. And I think that we need to start changing the way that we think about education when it comes to individuals who are returning citizens. After all, Article 1, Section 11 of the Illinois State Constitution says the objective is to restore people to useful citizenship. And in an effort to do that, mechanisms have to be set up to make it much more conducive for individuals coming out where we can walk them through it in a way where we say, hey, listen, this is the right thing to do. This is the righteous thing to do. And so I'm hoping that we can work towards that and continue to work towards that. I don't want this just to be a conversation that we have in the moment and not figure out ways to set up systems that will help us facilitate what it is that we all desire. We all have mothers and fathers and relatives who are elderly individuals. And for a lot of us, I believe that we give them the utmost respect and we try to make sure that we make life much more comfortable for them. And so I don't think that we should let that body of idea die among us. And I don't think that we should just forget about it because you don't want your mother suffering unnecessarily. And so if we want for ourselves what we want for others, such as our mothers and our grandmothers and our grandfathers and just elderly people that we know lived in our community that looked out for us and helped us get through. I believe that when parents have kids, it is the parents' responsibility to take care of the kids. And then I believe that once the kids grow up and get stronger and wiser, and their parents become elderly, it then becomes a responsibility for the kids to start helping take care of the family members. And so I'm hoping that among all of us that we can start working on ways to make sure that we're taking care of everybody as well. And I want to say thank y'all for allowing me the opportunity to share my ideas with y'all. And I will pass it back to Mr. Strickland. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin, who is my brother and friend, and we affectionately call SWAC. We're going to turn it over to Celia Colón, our sister and friend, Cece.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Well, good morning, everybody. I've been up very early, so it already feels like afternoon to me. I want to thank everybody for joining us on this very important topic, something very dear to me, something that we don't speak a lot about, something that should be more in the public eye. I want to just touch on a few things that Joe talked about in his very powerful presentation. Let me give you a little bit about my background first, so you guys know why I have such a passion and have firsthand experience and knowledge of people coming home from the system. So I am someone who also is justice impacted. I spent my whole youth in prison. I've been home for 21 years now. I've been serving my people since I've been home. Came home in 2000 and I've been serving back into the prisons since 2001. I have a non-for-profit. It's called G.O.D, Giving Others Dreams. It's a non-for-profit that proudly serves, justice impacted women. We provide direct reentry pathway services and holistic support programming to newly released women coming home. We take pride in providing a supportive space that promotes healing and the empowerment of women. I always say prevention is the key to saving humanity. And when we provide people with great care and support and love, great things happen. Because I'm in the trenches and I support women coming home, men as well, but mostly women, I see this all the time. I'm actually dealing with 3 elderly women that just recently were released. One of the biggest things that people don't understand is that unlike a young person coming home with all of these barriers, our elderly population, 55 and older, have even more, double the barriers than somebody else. And I say that because most of the time they're coming home to an elderly parent who, let's say, you're 70, your parent is usually 90 and 95, who, you know, needs help themselves. You come home with all these health conditions and issues due to, you know, living that disadvantaged life, living with all the stresses in prison, which generally will age you more than indicated if you were living out here. So because of the lack of medical oversight and care that someone has while they're in prison, they tend to come home with, I would say, harsher issues. There's really not any here in Illinois, I can't speak for other states, that senior suites or like senior homes that gladly and happily take people in with backgrounds. It's not happening. So our elderly people are sometimes left to go to shelters, sometimes left to stay with their younger children who don't have the time nor the capacity to really care for them like they need to be cared for. Some of them have a lot of health conditions that they need to be seen and go to the doctor once a week because maybe they're on dialysis, maybe they're fighting cancer. So these are a lot of heavy lifting that, you know, the family has to not only provide, but sometimes set up. And to be honest, we know in the state of Illinois, there's 15 zip codes that everybody comes home to, and they're on the south side and the west side. And our economics haven't changed. I'm from the South Side myself. And we don't have the capacity, the wealth, the time, right, to take care of someone the way they need to be taken care of when they come home. So not only are they dealing with the stress of having a background, trying to get medical care, 9 times out of 10, they cannot work. So they can't collect Social Security most of the time because maybe they've been locked up for 20 or 30 years. So they never were able to build on their Social Security, you know, funding. And so there's a lot of things that people don't talk about that needs to be talked about. And I'm so happy that this conversation is taking place because we know in the state of Illinois, the prison population increased from 2005, it was 3.5%. Right now in 2021, it increased to 14.3% due to the stress of prison life and, you know, disadvantaged backgrounds. And as Joe said, you know, people who commit violent crimes when they are young, they age out of crime. People who are between the age of 51 and 85 and are released. In Maryland, there was a study that out of 199 people who were released between the ages of 51 and 85, there was only a 2% recidivism rate versus 40 when it comes to the younger general population. The average cost, we've talked about the cost, but nobody really gave you the number. The average cost for here in Illinois, the fiscal cost in 2020 was $34,362. Well, for an elderly person in prison, it could cost over $68,000 for their care. So it's not fiscally nor morally right to keep someone who really has aged out of crime and is just deteriorating in prison and costing the taxpayers more money. It's wrong to just keep them there to suffer. There's so many ways that we can help our elderly people coming home by preparing them maybe with medical cards before they come home, with alternative care. They need to be set up not just for their 2 weeks home, but 90 days, 6 months of their medications, of their doctor's visits and appointments should be set up for them with a community hospital or clinic that can service them. A lot of them have transportation issues. A lot of them have depression issues, and the depression, can cripple you as a human being, as a person. It can destroy you. So not only is the family living with all the barriers that the person that came home with, because they're all impacted, right? So now they have all of these extra stressors of how am I going to pay for medication? How am I going to, pay for their care, their medical care? How am I going to keep this person alive by keeping myself alive? And no one really thinks about the impact on the family, how that really mentally, physically, emotionally, and financially puts a burden on not just the family, but for the entire community, because it affects all of us. Yes, I will. And these are the things that, we need to talk to our legislators about. We need to talk about alternatives for elderly people. Right now, the percentage, like I said, has increased. And it's like, it doesn't matter how rehabilitated they are, right? And how many years ago their crime was, and that they're less likely to offend. I mean, the data's there and it shows proof, right? They still tend to just imprison old people and keep them there, even when it serves the community, it serves us as a whole. No justice, no kind of peace, no kind of there's I can't even find our elderly people suffer in a place that's not meant for them to be. And one of the solutions that I am fighting for, and that I would like you all to kind of join in, is if you look up, there's a bill that's up for right now for the next legislation cycle, and it's called the Elderly Parole Bill, and it's to help people 55 years and older who have already at least been incarcerated for 25 consecutive years to extend the right to parole. Right now, it would only be about 3.4% of the population. In February 1st of 1978, Illinois abolished parole for all people that were sentenced before that date. So clemency is like the only remaining way to obtain early release for some of these people that were given really long sentences. So right now, one of the solutions that we're fighting for out here is the elderly parole bill, and you can find more about it if you look it up online. Another thing that I would like to say is that, it's a parole healing. It's just not an immediate release. The people who are being presented for this hopefully elderly parole bill would still have to go before a panel would make the decision, right? All the health issues that may exist with this person, and those that are serving life sentences. Thank you for gathering and making this issue very valid. And this is something we should be discussing, especially because of COVID-19. A lot of our elderly people who have pre-existing conditions have been given a death sentence without sentence to death, and that's sad. So I invite you all to just support your local nonprofit that's doing the work that you would like in your community. Reach out and to your alderman, to your state rep, to your legislators, to the governor, and find out what's happening behind the scenes in the prisons for their time.
Thank you so much, everyone, for just introducing us to so many of the issues that are important with reentry in the aging community. Dr. Strickland gave us some really important information. And Kevin and Celia, I can't thank you enough for your testimony and for sharing your personal experiences with reentry and with your experiences having been incarcerated. You can speak directly to what are the challenges of reentry. And I think overall, kind of the overall sense that I'm getting is that this is a quality of life issue, right? It's one thing to re-enter, but what does freedom mean if there is no quality of life? And so that's really kind of what we want to talk about. How can we make this a better quality of life that folks are experiencing once they've been released? And what I'm really excited about is that we really have some experts with us this morning. People who are out there, know what the challenges are, what's happening now. I think COVID has really turned everybody upside down. And so in particular for this community, for the aging community, folks may have been released, but released to quarantine, released to masking mandates, released to isolation. So that's isolation on top of isolation that you're going to experience because you no longer have those connections and support networks that you actually may have had while incarcerated. You know, there's at least a community, small community where you're talking with people every day to, you know, you come to the outside and maybe you've lost connection with friends, with family, don't know what the resources are. And so there's that double isolation. But without, you know, going into that too much, we want to really take this opportunity that we have, the time that we have left to engage in dialogue. Feel free, I'm going to ask a couple of questions to our panelists, but please feel free to unmute yourselves or use the hand raising feature to ask questions, to inform us about, you know, maybe something that is currently happening with IDOC or Cook County DOC in terms of what services are available, what's changed, especially with respect to the pandemic in terms of helping our aging citizens return safely and in a way that they can enjoy a good quality of life. So again, thank you so much to our presenters. And I wanted to begin with just a few questions that open to anyone, any one of you, if you want to speak to it. Starting off with our first question, excuse me. So, you know, I recently heard about a gentleman in Pennsylvania who was released from prison after serving 68 years. He went in when he was 15, came out when he was 83, and he was sentenced to life in prison. And so he became what is known as a juvenile lifer. He was offered release on parole, but refused it because he did not want to be released on parole. That he didn't feel it was necessary to be on parole after having served more than 60 years in prison. So my question for the panelists is, you know, what are the conditions of parole that might be particularly challenging for an aging citizen that we might not see? It's challenging regardless, but what are your thoughts on that? And that's open to Eddie.
So let me just start, and then I'll let Kevin and Celia chime in because they're closer to the issue than I am. You know, one thing I didn't mention is behavioral health, right? You know, mental health, just the trauma of having been incarcerated, right? And also the issue of what it's like when you've been incarcerated all that time and you've become disconnected from friends, community. You know, think about individuals who grew up in CHA housing, or what we call the projects, right? And then knowing that that whole community, however you view the projects or CHA housing, that whole community is no longer there. So what would you be returning home to, right? You know, to me, and I'm not going to get off on a tangent on CHA housing being demolished, but you know, that was Chicago's Katrina, right? Because, you know, for me, you know, I'm from this community. I live in this community now. For me, returning home, I knew what I was coming home to. I knew I was going to be able to connect to a social network of folks that could assist. So an individual who's aged in prison, you know, that's become their life. That's become a connection. That's become a resource for food and housing. To go home and then have to fend for themselves is probably something where they would say that that's a no-win situation for me.
Yes, I would agree. I'd agree with everything that Mr. Strickland just said. And I would like to add to that by saying that it's like you go from one struggle to another struggle. When if you spent 80 years in prison, 30 years in prison, 20 years in prison, and you're coming home as an elderly person, especially in the atmosphere that we're living in now, it was compact. Not only have you had to go through this whole tremendous struggle of surviving in this foreign environment, but then it's like you come home and then you're back in another foreign environment. And then you have to deal with some of the restrictions that are put on you as security measures when you are returning back home. So when you're on, we oftentimes we use this word, we use this word parole, which is, I have to say that oftentimes it's misplaced. People who have been incarcerated, when we hear you say parole, we understand it, but for the purpose of us really understanding what that means is that we haven't had a parole system since 78. So technically, what we're referring to as parole is actually what's called MSR, mandatory supervised release. And typically, depending on what type of crime you've been that you're coming home from or been accused of, um, the term's like 3 years. And so before you get here, you have to go to the prison review board, and they may add even more stipulations to what it is that they feel that they want you to do as a condition, a precondition of you being released back out in society. For some people, it may be a stipulation may be, I want you to go to a drug treatment. Another stipulation may be, I want you to go, I want you to get a job. They may refer you to go see some mental health people. They may even refer you to get a particular type of treatment. And some of these things are okay, but I think what people miss is that when you come home into a society that is not welcoming towards you, and it's like they're pushing you into a caste system, and then on top of that, you come home and you've been hit by the pandemic, COVID-19. Some of the resources that may have been available to you now are no longer available. I think when I came home, I was 40, 45, 46 when I came home. I got locked up at 16, came home 45, 46. And for me, it was a struggle. So I can imagine what it would be like for somebody who was maybe 15 years older than me, who may have been in their 60s, who didn't have the energy to have to get up and go try to stand in line at the DMV or on 95th or even out here in the suburbs, and the line is all the way around the block. You got a bad hip, you got bad feet. That's something. And it was something for me. So I know it had to be something for some of the elder brothers and sisters that were coming home. Not only do you have to deal with that, you have to contend with the idea that some of the elderly people that are coming home, because society is not welcoming to them, they still have to figure out a way to sustain their life, the quality of their life. You just went through hell up in there. So now you mean tell me I want you to come home and I want to just give you some crumbs to live off of, knowing that you are not healthy enough to go out here and really compete in the job market that is overly welcoming to young people, because they want to use their energy and their strength to go do the labor that they need for them to do. Elderly people coming home, they got a hell of a challenge. I know many of my comrades right now who are working in factories. And when I was in prison with them, these guys was big, they were strong, they was some heck of a men. And now I hear them, they call me and they're like, hey, little bro, I don't know how long I can continue to do this job where I have to work in the factory, where I have to stand up on my feet all day. I'm overweight, my feet hurt, I got a bad hip, but I know that if I don't do this, it may increase the chances of me returning back to prison, because I may have to go out here and participate in felonious behavior just to try to make ends meet. I need to help out with my family when it comes to paying a mortgage. My mama's elderly. She don't have a lot of money coming in, so I want to make sure that I can try to look out for her. I got grandbabies. I got kids who are going through their struggles, and it's all been compounded by COVID-19. And you're coming home at 60 years old and somebody else 65 years old, and somebody's expecting you to go out here and compete in a market that is not welcoming for you. Right now in our society, you try to go find a truck, a box truck, to get in the trucking business to do work. All of the young people, everybody's going running around to go do it. You come on 65 years old with a bad hip and bad feet, overweight, fighting diabetes, high blood pressure, anxiety from being in this crazy environment all this time and fighting 60 years, 30 years, 40 years, 20 years to get home. You can't jump in no doggone truck and be driving all doggone day across town and try to make no ends meet for yourself. So as a society and as people, I think that that's something that needs to be changed. That is a typical hardship. There doesn't have to be one. So until we start changing the way we view and think about elderly people in our society, I think we're gonna be in trouble. Because guess what? We were once young and vibrant and strong, and we're gonna get old, and we're gonna get overweight, and our hips are gonna be hurting, and our feet are gonna be hurting. So if we ain't thinking about them, look in that mirror and think about yourself. And if these are some things that you don't want to have to contend with, then I think it's time that we give some real attention to some results and different things that we're going to need to make sure that not only are we creating an atmosphere for the elderly people who are already existing, but we're making room for ourselves because we will be right behind them in a little bit of time. And we want to make sure that we are creating a platform and atmosphere so when individuals are coming home, we can be more welcoming to them. We don't have to cause a typical hardship that is unnecessarily if we change the way we think about how we view elderly. And this goes back to education and it goes back to communication. Communication can enhance our level of understanding about what is needed if we talk. And then from talking, we can figure out what is needed so that we don't have to have people suffering unnecessarily. And then I'm gonna pass it to my sister and let her give y'all her view as well.
Thank you for your heart and your passion. So they kind of covered all the topics already, but one thing that I really want to drill is the mental health aspect. That's something that's so dear to me. You know, our mind is everything. Our mindset is everything. It controls everything. And one of the things that no one really likes to talk about are those scars of prison PTSD and how it impacts us and it impacts our family, impacts how we interact with everybody. Depression is one of the biggest things that my women, even the men, but mostly the women, come home suffering from. They feel unwelcomed, unloved. You know, we fight so hard when we're in prison to be like a model prisoner so we can get released early to a society that doesn't want us and never has wanted us, but really don't want us now and doesn't accept us. Yes, our elderly people, even if you don't have a background, have a higher rate of unemployment, have a higher rate of homelessness. So let's throw some X's on top of that. Those stressors change everything, not just for you, but for your whole family. And that magnitude of harm, the multiple layers of harm, the whole family feels it, the community feels it. And I'm glad we're talking about this, but I think there should be a designated, there is, not that I'm aware of, you know, but maybe somebody does know of a non-for-profit that focused just on the elderly, the 55 to 95-year-olds. I haven't had any interactions with any community orgs that specifically work on just that age group because, like Dr. Strickland said, and we all know there's specific and different barriers and needs for people of that age, especially coming from such a harsh background like the prison system. And we've all probably seen, if not, I invite you to see Shawshank Redemption, where the elderly man who spent a decade in prison comes home and decides, hey, I'd rather go back to prison because I can, you know, at least relate there and know how the world is structured there, or commit suicide. And the man committed suicide. And there's a lot of people that I've talked to and have confided in me who've also felt like they'd rather be back in prison because at least there they had a structure, they had someone welcome them, even if it was just their cellmate, right? They had some kind of care, and they're not out here in the world of unknown, not knowing how they're going to eat, how they're going to live. They're not welcome. We as humans, we're tribal people. We always want to be connected. We always want to be welcomed. We always want to be with our, you know, other humans. And they feel alone. They feel helpless. They feel useless because their bodies don't do what they used to do when they were younger. And they have a lot of health issues and conditions that really deter their mental health state, right? And we know when our mental health is in the uproar and not in a good place, it affects all of our chronic issues. So I would really just like to connect with people who are focused and are helping our elderly population. I would like, you know, if any org is specifically doing just that, to really connect with you, because I do have a lot of our survivors are coming home. A lot of our women are coming home, and they have a lot of mental health challenges and emotional challenges, and a lot of family reunification issues. You know, it's not just about your immediate children, but your whole family, you know, how that takes into play of who you are as a person. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your comments. And Celia, you bring up an important issue with this conversation, and that's just kind of our understanding of aging, right? Like you mentioned the age group of 55 to 95. So one thing I think many of us here on this call today understand is that the aging process accelerates when you're in prison or jail, and so aging, you know, to most other folks might mean something like 65 and up, like retirement age. But I know Kevin, you and I are the same age, and I know we're not yet 50, but we already need readers. Maybe I'll speak for myself. You know, I can't see my phone without putting some glasses on. It's not the same process getting out of bed. There's aches and pains. And so, you know, this issue of aging, like, what do we mean by that? You know, it begins earlier than 55, probably, I would say. So I can only imagine what, you know, the challenges for folks who have had, you know, to experience incarceration and then come, you know, re-enter the community and be afraid because you're navigating a world that you're just not accustomed to anymore. So that we have that issue, like, what are our thoughts on what really, you know, what is the age category for aging? And then we have a question in our chat that specifically asks, you know, at what age does the age out of crime start? You know, so there's this time period when folks start to age out of crime, where they're no longer really as much at risk of you know, perpetrating crimes. And you know, so it kind of begs the question, you know, if there is such a reduced risk to the community from the, you know, aging citizens, what is the necessity of being on parole or on mandatory supervised release, you know, for those individuals, if really they are most likely not going to pose a risk to the community? So there's that kind of two-sided question regarding what aging means, not only in terms of what we mean by aging, but what do we like, what are the risks to the community? And I will be you know, that's open for anyone, and I'm going to monitor the chat as well for additional questions.
I don't have the statistics in front of me. I can just speak to personal experience and anecdotal data. You know, really, it's going to depend on the individual and the opportunity. You know, individuals who are prepared to come home and have a connection to social network, social capital, jobs, housing, would less likely be involved in illicit activity out of survival mode, right? So, you know, just the experience of prison for someone, you know, 35 or older, is enough of a deterrence for them to, you know, start looking away. But in some cases, you know, even guys at 50 or 60, I see, you know, in the community out selling loose squares or cigarettes, for anyone that's not familiar with that term. And, you know, which doesn't seem like a big crime, but it's still a crime, right? But I think the major concern is, you know, someone that would be committing gun crimes or crimes with a weapon and things of that nature. And Socia, I'm not sure if you saw Jacqueline Frank's hand, but she has had her hand.
I sure do. Thank you, Dr. Strickland. Thank you. I appreciate that feedback. Yeah, thank you, Jacqueline, for your patience. Did you want to speak to us on your some information you have about aging services?
Yes, and sort of a question too, but also related to what was just discussed. I think I don't know of a lot of research studies, but like if you just even look at the data of the age of people going into prison and crimes, et cetera, you see that age, especially for violent crimes, that average age start to dip after the 30s. So, but in terms of, aging out of crime, I'm not, that's the best I can do on that. But I raised my hand because, and first of all, thank you all very much, panelists. This was really great, really thought-provoking. And I'm kind of jumping off from what Celia was last talking about in that. So I'm kind of coming from this from the other side. So I'm a professor at Eastern Illinois University. Most of my teaching deals with gerontology, aging in the family, so intergenerational issues. And then about 12, 13 years ago, I got a lot more involved in prison related work and working with people who are incarcerated, et cetera, which then came and became aging within prison, and then release and reentry. And one thing that none of you mentioned, which is not a negative, it's just an interesting point in and of itself, is kind of where are the aging agencies in all of this? So, sitting here from that perspective, it's like, and that's not an accusatory statement. It's, is there anyone in the audience today from an area agency on aging or from the Illinois Department on Aging? I know there have been some connections attempted with the Illinois Department on Aging, but from that flip side, it's I think that side is not reaching out because, again, it all boils down to stigma. And the services that area agencies on aging provide throughout the state, throughout the country, there's so many possibilities for good connections at the local or state level with these nonprofits, with people who are returning citizens who are older, but they're not happening. And it's like when I've given presentations and some of these issues have been brought up, boy, there's some blank stares or some scared looks on people's faces. What? Well, I mean, they can't not offer these services to convicted felons who are coming home, returning citizens, but they're not rushing out to do it, or they're certainly not trying to make any connection to serve that population who really needs it. And then in general, there's a lot of people in the community who don't know about area agencies on aging or other organizations that do serve older adults that would help returning citizens as well. And so it seems like there's sort of a gap, but also just a little bit of a silence and a hesitation on the aging services side to engage with a stigmatized population. So, I mean, I'm kind of working on trying to destigmatize, but it's just this sort of silence that really bothers me the more I hear these narratives. And I don't know if anyone on the panel or anyone else here has more experience or some good narratives or partnership stories to tell, or ideas about how to get over that hump. And now I'll be quiet. That was a really long question.
No need to be quiet. I appreciate your feedback. And it's a really important issue, the stigma and the silence. Communication is really the key to really collaborating, right? I wanted to give an opportunity to Dean Hairston, who has her hand up. I'm sure you have a wealth of information that you can share with us.
I don't really have a wealth of information, but I do have a little information that looks promising, in that the Policy Center at the college is partnering with the Illinois Department on Aging and the development of their strategic plan. And one of the areas that's going to be a part of that plan is really older persons who are returning home from prison. And so as a part of our partnership, we will be holding listening sessions with persons who are 60 and over, who have spent time in prison or jail and who have returned home, to look specifically at their needs and concerns. And just sitting here this morning, I thought, this is the session right here. You know, we're going to have some more listening sessions, but I've learned so much that I think needs to be considered and a part of that plan. So thank you.
Thank you, Dean Hairston. That's exciting news. Those lived experiences are really what is going to hopefully bridge that gap between, what research and policy is, information we have, and then the experiences with direct people who are advocating and people who have lived these experiences. We want to move to another question because we have time for that. I wanted to just make sure that, is there any other comments or feedback regarding what the Dean just shared with us, or just questions in general that anyone wants to come off mic?
I just like to say that's very exciting news. Put a big smile on my face, something that's been missing and ignored for a long time. And just it fills my heart with joy that something is actually being done, or at least, that spark has been ignited. And hopefully even everybody on this call could keep these thoughts and keep these conversations in your mind and your heart, and think about what can we do? How can we create something that maybe is not available, and create this really successful layout of what an elderly being released from, a harmful place looks like, right? And how do we set them up prior to them coming home? One of the things that stuck in my mind is when Kevin said that, he, and forgive me if I said this, quote you wrong, but, you prepared yourself as much as you could coming home. And I did the same. But when you come home, everything that you thought you prepared yourself for is not what you're going to face. It's not reality. And you actually have a whole different set of issues and barriers that you haven't planned how you're going to deal with them. And sometimes that puts you in a state of confusion, depression, fear, the fear of the unknown, which, unless you have the proper supports, mentors, and care around you, you might not make the right decision, right? So I think that creating something and really, really connecting to the Department of Aging, I've never thought about doing that. And the more that I am so grateful that you thought that you even brought this up, because a lot of orgs in the city don't work with the Department of Aging because that's not the group, that a lot of us work with. But it's about time we do. So thank you.
Thank you, Celia. And just to your point, so for a short time, I was helping on a project with one of our directors at the Center for Policy and Research. And the Department on Aging is an enormous organization. Enormous. I mean, I think they have more employees than any other state. I mean, I don't know. I just know they have so many employees. It's a huge department. And so there's a lot of potential and opportunity, I think, to collaborate and to just communicate. And just, speaking to kind of what's going on with IDOC and Cook County DOC in terms of things that they're doing to make the reentry process a smoother transition, smoother experience for folks. I was on a call the other day and I heard about a lot of things that are in the works. And so I think, for example, with state IDs, and they're collaborating with the Secretary of State office, and just collaborating as well with the Illinois Department of Public Aid to make sure that folks have a smooth transition for their SSI benefits and for Medicare and Medicaid. And so it's really important to have this communication with, and networking with folks to understand like what's happening on the inside. How can we make sure that that's a smooth transition for everyone, so that no one gets lost in the process. Because even if those services are available in terms of reentry kind of assistance on the inside, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to catch everybody. There are going to be folks that are released and have no idea where to go for care, for health care. And it kind of, leads to my next question, which if we don't have any other questions, we may end with this question, but the issue of technology in terms of not only keeping in touch with friends and family, but telehealth, I myself am very intimidated by technology. I'll get nervous just trying to put something in the chat, I'll be honest. And so, I can only imagine how it is for folks who just have no idea even how to turn on a Zoom call or to do a FaceTime call with friends and family. I'm just curious in terms of your all's experience, is there anything that's happening inside that might prepare an aging citizen for dealing with technology? Because it seems that everything is based on technology now, and if you are not savvy with that you are definitely going to feel even more isolated. So I'm just curious in terms of what you all think about, what's happening. Do we know what's happening in terms of transitioning and making that support, that tech support available, and teaching folks how to use technology?
I think that they really haven't put, some kind of teaching, program for people coming home, but there are a lot of prisons that are using the video system, the email system. So a lot of people are kind of learning systems that they never knew existed before. So majority of them, especially with COVID, turned over to the video visits because, in-person visits were taken away. And then they created the emails where people are able to communicate via email. So I think they're getting a little bit of the basics, but most of the time, not even elderly people, young people who are locked up and come home, we have in my office, we do direct reentry pathway training. And that's one of the biggest ones is the basic computer literacy program and learning how to use your phone, how to download apps, how to use Cash App, how to, FaceTime. So a lot of learning and technology is changing every day. So again, this is something that should always be just elevating and changing on a daily basis. And it's not being done, but it's being done by a lot of non-for-profits and orgs that offer direct services when they come home.
Well, I want to say that it's so I did 30 years in prison. I did mostly all of my time in the Supermax. I did 12 in Supermax, and I did all the other time basically in the Max joints, Pontiac, Stateville, Menard, and then I think when I got about, I did like 3.5 years in a minimum camp. And when they got time for me to get closer to come home, they put me in what's called a career tech class. I got in the career tech class when it came to like just history and just knowing different things. I was like this, whether it was with the old people that were older than me or the younger people. Then part of the class of career tech, you have to deal with computers. They put me in front of the computer and I'm looking at kids who were ahistorical, who didn't know nothing about history and not that much about life. They typing with both hands going crazy. And I'm sitting there feeling like I'm in my prime, like I'm on something, my chest poked out, and I'm over there chicken pecking. And it took me a minute to try to figure out how to deal with the computer. So what I learned from it is that as a elderly person, because I realized that I was getting older, that if you're not solid intellectually, spiritually, emotionally, it can do something to you psychologically to be in a situation where you know that you're finna go home after doing like 30 years in prison, and you know that this computer that we're using is outdated. Yet this is what you're getting to practice on. And so when you go out into society, the adjustment process of you, or you just trying to acclimate, is going to be difficult because you're dealing with a system that is outdated, that is not actually preparing you for this transition. And so when I came home and I got the phone, it took me about a day or two to just really figure out how to operate it from a remedial standpoint. And as I said, I've been home 2 years, and the 28th of this month will be 2 months, 2 years and 2 months. I worked 4 or 5 jobs. And so I'm now just getting into the groove of figuring out how to do Zoom, or how to do Basecamp, or how to do Act Blue, or just how to like download simple things. Or I was recently doing some with my niece is getting ready to go to college, and her mother sent me a list, like a gift list. So you know, I felt like I was ready and was trying to go through it and figure things out. And I'm like, man, look, I need some help because you got to remember passwords and codes, and that can be overwhelming to somebody coming home who hasn't had access to modern technology in 20, 30 years. That's going to be a struggle. So we need to try to figure out how do we make that process easier um, through digital literacy, computer literacy, and give individuals the fundamentals about how to set it up and do different things so it doesn't become discouraging. Because as an elderly person, you may be embarrassed or you may be filled with shame that you don't know how to operate your phone. So rather than ask for help because you feel as though that you're the adult and you're the elderly person, that you'll be dismissive and closed-minded about even trying to learn about moving forward and learn this particular type of technology. So it can all we don't look at the social emotional aspects of it and the trauma that can also be related to it of an individual coming home to uh, a world that's like has grown so much, and the environment you was just in didn't prepare you for that. That can be disheartening.
Thank you, Kevin. That's absolutely correct. You just don't want to have that feeling that you don't belong in the world you just got released to. We have time for one more question. I want to make sure that we get to Dr. Lisette Lopez from Cook County Department of Corrections.
Thank you, Yoli. I just kind of wanted to add on a little about the question that you asked about what's going on inside. So I am currently inside of the jail and work with the women. I will say that we are years behind on technology here. The Zoom visits were a big change for us. We also have now smart cards where we can provide programming, more documentaries, more PowerPoint slides, but that's only to the people who are actually enrolled in programming. So it's still very limited. We're behind. Just basic computer tech classes, we don't have that. It's something we would really like to work towards. And we have been doing research on programs that offer like tablet emailing, tablet programming that can be done more individually and be more widespread to everybody. But we are definitely very, very behind. The farthest we've gotten, I think COVID has pushed us to try to embrace and accept more technology within the jail, which, like I said, are the Zoom visits and the smart programming on the carts.
Thank you so much for sharing that information. It's really great to know what's happening on the inside. We have actually run out of time for questions, but I do see that there's some folks that want to share, and I would invite you to share your emails if you feel comfortable, or your contact information in the chat. I think folks would be more than grateful to be able to contact folks who have information on what's happening with IDOC and other organizations. I would just want to pass it over to Dr. Strickland, who's going to leave us with some closing remarks. And I want to thank you all once again for joining us. This is a really important issue, and we've heard some wonderful testimonies in terms of just lived experiences that we can really use to inform our work. And so I thank you again for sharing your experiences with us. So I'll pass it over to Dr. Strickland. Thank you.
Thank you, Sochi. Man, I want to thank Sochi for putting this together. She is amazing. We're lucky and blessed to have her. I also want to thank those individuals who are working behind the scenes and who have worked behind the scenes to make this happen. Therese Molina, Brian Tibbs, and Sean Parra. We couldn't have done this without them. And of course, I want to thank all of you for coming. You know, we began this work several years ago. I think my excuse for this not moving along further is going to be COVID, because we were disconnected from each other. But that's an excuse, because there's still men and women suffering every day. Again, I'm blessed to be working with and for Dr. Hairston, who understands my passion for the community and my need to be connected to the community. And you know, our work, I think both of us said like maybe 3 or 4 years ago that that we're at the point now where we have to do stuff that matters. We have to do stuff that is effective and that people can feel. So that's where we are now. So we're glad that we reconnected with some of you and connected with those of you who we hadn't met. And now the work is going to move forward. We'll be following up with you. If we don't have your information, please email me. I'll put my email address in the chat. But we're looking forward to connecting. We don't want to do this work in a silo where we're doing this little bit over here and somebody doing that over here. I mean, you've raised some good points about how agencies should be connected. And we know we need to be reconnected to IDOC. We know we need to be connected to the Lieutenant Governor's office that's doing reentry work. We know we need to be connected to families of people who are incarcerated. We know we need to be connected to those individuals that are returning citizens. We know we need to be connected to those informal social networks, which are crucial for folks coming home. I mean, I wouldn't know I wouldn't know Kevin Blumenberg if he hadn't been part of, you know, one of those informal social networks. And we were actually connected to him while he was still incarcerated. And, you know, he was saying such high level and amazing things that he excited us. So we were blessed to, you know, welcome him back into the community and have folks walk him through those processes of, you know, something as basic as getting a haircut and getting his driver's license. These people, Kevin and Cece, are essential to, you know, folks getting services. So, but you know, the work begins or re-begins, however you want to say it. So we'll be in touch with you so we can move forward. And I'm going to turn it over to Dean Hairston.
I don't think that I've heard thank you so many times in one session as I've heard today. And there's a reason for that. And I just want to end us by saying thanks to the panelists, to everybody who's participated, and certainly to the team at the Jane Addams Center for Social Policy and Research. And now, you know, we've heard issues, but we've also heard solutions. And I do have to add that I thought I knew everything about older persons returning home from prison, because this has been an area of concern and passion for me for many years. But I only know a little bit. And thank you so much, Kevin, for really talking about the emotional aspects of returning home, because I had never really looked at that in the way that you described today. So without prolonging us and talking about my own experiences and how pleased I am that we are continuing this work at the Policy Center, it's like I'll end by saying, thank you. This has been a wonderful session this morning. Now let's go about doing the work.